You don't get to control how things end. That's just not the way life works. For a long time, I don't think I knew how to handle that reality. That's where addiction came in. And honestly, I almost blew it all. To this day, I don't think people realize how close I came to losing everything. That's why I wanted to film some big parts of the last year of my career in 2019. To document the ending of that chapter of my life. To try and show that I could have my own kind of happily ever after. But the end of a story doesn't mean anything if you don't know everything that came before it.
Dig, say dig!
When I think back to those days in my grandmother's backyard, all the dreams I had back then, it all came true.
All right, we are back. You guys heard the trailer for the HBO Max documentary about CC Sabathia, Under the Grapefruit Tree. Joining me today, we both watched the documentary, had some thoughts on it. Alan Austin is here. Alan, how are you?
Good, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I have to say, one thing I'll give HBO always a ton of credit for, they know how to make good trailers, because even the Tiger Woods one, the trailer for that documentary is so incredible, even the doc itself was not.
It's quite a skill to be able to release a good trailer. And how many films over the years have we seen a trailer be super pumped, and then we see the film and we're like, gosh. So yeah, they do a great job at the trailers, and they just have such high quality production value in general.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Before we get into the doc, I want to update the people listening to the podcast in chronological order here about some breaking news in the baseball world. We recorded with both the baseball beat and our legal guy, Phil Frayetta. We recorded them last night. The Mets made a move. That last night was obviously Thursday, the 18th. We were here on Friday, the 19th, and the Mets did make a new move. Add some starting pitching depth, signed Taijuan Walker, 2-year deal, $20 million, player option for the 3rd year. I think this is a good move for the Mets to sort of round out the offseason. What do you think?
Great move. I mean, they've had the money to spend. They've missed out on some big free agents, and you're not breaking the bank for a guy who's entering, I believe, his age 28 season, who shows that he has upside based on his 2020 and 2019 a little bit. But here's a guy that was a top prospect for a couple of years in the Mariners organization, bounced around the league a little bit. He's still young, and he's finally maybe overcome all these injuries that have plagued him. I think it's a great move for the Mets and a cheap one.
Yeah, it's also good for the Mets to give themselves some rotation stability, because next year both Marcus Stroman and Noah Syndergaard are free agents. Now you don't have to re-sign both of them. You could have 4 good guys. As long as you retain one of the 2, you're in good shape for next year.
Competition breeds the best in everybody, so you're theoretically providing depth to keep everyone on their A game and, sink or swim. And I think the Mets have done a really good job at adding bullpen and rotation pieces that can push each other. And with Syndergaard coming back, the heat's on for these guys to perform.
Yeah, and to go from one free agent pitcher to another who was a much more high caliber signing, the Taijuan Walker deal, CC Sabathia, the documentary, and we got to talk a little bit off the air about this. What's your overall take on this film, Under the Grapefruit Tree? You can stream it on HBO Max now.
I'll say this. Same with the Craig Carton doc. If you're a fan of the subject, so if you're a CC Sabathia fan, this is going to be right up your alley. It's an inside look at him and his family, told through his eyes, his story. It covers a little bit of the ups and the downs all together, gets into his family history a little bit. So if you're a fan of CC, this is a documentary for you, 110%. If you're coming at it with no knowledge of the player, if you're just, let's say, a person who's scrolling HBO Max and lands on this, it's a good documentary. I don't feel it's anything earth-shattering, but it did what needed to be done and told the story that CC wanted to tell. So in that regard, it's good. It's a good movie. I don't think it's anything earth-shattering or truly revealing. Or I mean to say, I don't think there's anything that's a true new revelation, but it is effective in telling his story the way he wanted.
I think it's fine. I think in parlance of the movies industry, so where this pop culture thing fits in here, I'd say sort of like the Star Trek Beyond of documentaries, where it's fine, it has a good story. They do a solid job. They go for the double. They hit the double. Like if they wanted to be ambitious, they could have made it more deep and more nuanced. But like considering creative involvement, I'm sure CC had in this process, it's a fine product. It's nothing that makes you say, "Oh boy, I got to go watch it again."
Yeah, I mean, I think, congratulations to CC for overcoming his addiction and for making it out alive, which, as we see in the beginning of the film, wasn't necessarily a guarantee. I do think they don't ever cross that barrier to true, despair, other than he had a really bad drinking problem. And maybe there wasn't that barrier to cross, but I mean, the family was an executive producer. Who knows what they were willing to say and not willing to say? Who knows what their intentions were with the piece? Was it truly a post-retirement sort of brief look into his life that they wanted to get out there for his podcast or for his popularity? Who knows? Who knows what the intention was of the piece? But the piece as it stands now is good, like you said.
Yeah, it's solid. And I think, obviously, interesting choice here because a lot of these docs, it starts out with the Craig Carton documentary you watched back when, is that Craig was the narrator of his story in this one. And they did the same, right? They went CC Sabathia as the narrator of his tale. And we had interviews cut in with his wife, Brian Cashman, some teammates on occasion. But what do you think of the choice of CC as the narrator?
To be honest with you, I wasn't a fan. And it has nothing to do with the choice of CC being a narrator. It just sounded very scripted and robotic. It did not seem like a human being speaking his truth. It sounded like a guy reading a script that was written for him based on his life. Now, when they do the one-on-ones, the confessional, he comes off very authentic. There are tears in his eyes. He's telling the stories with emotions, and he swears, and he's just letting it all on the line. But the narration over it is just very robotic, very scripted, hard to listen to, in fact, in my opinion.
Yeah, I did notice that too, is that it seems like two different people when CC is just answering questions to the camera as opposed to CC narrating. And you're definitely right. It does feel like that maybe whoever the producer was, the director said, okay, let's hit these points. Here's some line for you to follow. I don't know if CC had input in that, but it did come off a bit robotic in terms of you have to mention this and here's how I would say it, opposed to here's how CC would say it.
It also sounds like he's doing a narrator voice.
Yeah.
Like he's trying his best to narrate instead of just tell the story.
Yeah, maybe it's maybe sort of he feels the idea, because now he has a podcast of his own he's trying to launch and trying to get into the broadcasting. Maybe he feels like, I have to do this to showcase my range a little bit. I don't think it worked.
No, the narration and the confessionals are night and day. The confessionals, the one-on-ones are what make this movie, to be quite honest, worth watching. The narration is a very big swing and a miss, so to speak.
Yeah, it is a swing and a miss. I do think also, it's fine the first half when you see the beginning of his career, you see him go with the Indians, you remember how good he was in Milwaukee, and that's something I feel like I honestly forgot about with CC, was everybody knows the Indian stuff. I forgot the Milwaukee half a season when he was so brilliant down the stretch, earned that contract with the Yankees.
It's funny that you forgot about that, because that's still what I think about first when I think of CC. It's not his run with the Yankees. It's that miraculous grinding out every appearance run for Milwaukee when he went over there in '08. And my friend and I still talk about it. It's like a thing of legend, how he just went out there all the time and dominated. And that's what I first think of when I think of CC Sabathia's career. And believe me, as a Detroit Tigers fan, him as an Indian, I couldn't stand him for many years, but I respected him.
Yeah, well, CC's run probably also came at the expense of the Mets in '08, so maybe I suppressed that memory a little bit. Maybe,
yeah. It's definitely a sore spot for you. You buried that down deep, apparently.
Yeah, and I think most of it was pretty if you followed CC at all, you have a good idea. I think the only really revelatory stuff here was the extent of CC's alcoholism. It peaks in 2015. We know that he went to rehab before the playoffs, before the wild card game they lost the Astros. I think the most compelling part was how he described sort of going through the process of how his drinking progressed to the point where they go to that series in Baltimore, they have the rain out on the Saturday, and then he gets so drunk, he shows up to the bullpen session on Sunday, the last day of the regular season, because he can't stand up straight and do his job. That's when he's like, oh, wow, I need help. But I think, to me, that was the most effective part of the whole documentary.
Yes, and then he piggybacks that with, on the ride home to check himself into rehab, he stopped for 2 bottles of Hennessy to have, like, a send-off for himself. Like, that's the stuff that is, like, you know, that's what a lot of people out in this world can relate to. So hopefully it teaches people that it's never too late and you can overcome these demons.
Yeah, I think that's the best part of this is his whole story, because, like, to be honest, like, his career, as good as he was, they did not need to get into that much of it, because, I mean, yes, it was cool to learn that the Yankees made an offer on the very first day of free agency. I think we kind of knew that already, or at least had a sense of it. This was the stuff that I think got my interest the most.
Yeah, this stuff and the stuff with his father and the elements of death being so prevalent in his life and his inability to cope with it. And that coupled with the fact that, you know, he doesn't have that male role model since his dad died in '03, and he's constantly trying to find someone he can lend his, you know, his head on. He can lean his head on their shoulder and get advice and love. And he seems to have really had problems with not being able to have that after, you know, his cousin also died. So that stuff was very effective, and that's the stuff that kept me engaged.
Yeah, I also thought the other thing that was a little interesting was seeing a little bit of the behind the scenes from 19. I thought it was a good way to sort of start us out, drop us in his final appearance, and just go through his story, then come back to it. I had forgotten, too, because that was a sort of one of those Yankee playoffs. I forgot he left the game basically because he got hurt, and he ended up having to basically, as he said, get dragged off the field. And I thought that was a good sort of way to sort of fit him in today's world. Like, hey, like, not everybody gets the storybook ending where you're Peyton Manning, you win the Super Bowl, you get to retire on top. Like, a lot of guys just go out like that.
Yeah, you know, I think it's what real life is and what sports are. Athletes can break down over time. I mean, how often do we think of a 35-year-old man in sports as, like, ready to sign up for AARP?
Yeah.
Like, in our minds as fans, you know, these people are old, broken down has-beens, but they're still young people on this earth. They're still, you know, it's unfortunate that this 39-year-old man at the time was broken down and couldn't do what he loves anymore, but he's still got a lot of life ahead of him. So we have to remember as sports fans that just because they're old with the context of the game, they still have a lot of life ahead. And to see him go out this way was unfortunate, but he's still going to do so much more in the sport and in the public eye that it's just the beginning.
Yeah, indeed. I think now's a good time. I think we should grade this thing. What do you think the grade is overall on the Under the Grapefruit tree?
I'd give it a B because it was effective. It told a nice story. It was, you know, high production value, even if we didn't care for the narration. You know, it used a lot of good footage, a lot of behind the scenes, like you said, and Cece's a likable guy. You know, the same story for a guy who's like miserable or who seems negative is not going to be as effective. But this did the job. There wasn't anything truly revealing or monumental or anything that, you know, really shocked us as a viewer. So as a documentary, you know, I'd say it's a B.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you on the B. I sort of put it in perspective of the 3 HBO dots I've seen over the last few months, the Carton one, Tiger, and this. Tiger's the worst because they basically tried to go for shock value there and didn't give you a full picture on it. They gave you some nice stuff, but a lot of it was just like made you feel icky watching it. Carton's one, I gave the A because it was well done. You get raw emotion from Craig. You learn a lot of new things. Maybe it was rushed a little bit for the release, but I think it was very well done. I feel this is in the middle. This is a B. Like, it's a solid story. They tell it pretty well. They don't like do anything that really knocks your socks off, but like I don't feel like I wasted my time watching it.
No, not at all. And like I said, Sabathia and his wife Amber are likable people. Like they are, when they are on screen and they are speaking, we are listening because we want to hear what they have to say. So kudos to Cece for putting his life on the, you know, out there for us to see. And hopefully it helps people who are struggling, you know, affects their life in a positive way. And the Tiger doc did not include Tiger. if this didn't include CC or if Cartons didn't include Craig, it's just so much less of a product. So to have the actual subject of the documentary be available, present, and truthful is a big help.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's streaming on HBO Max. I think you and I are both agreeing here. If you're a Yankee fan or you like CC or like this kind of material appeals to you, I think you'll like it, but like it's not a must watch.
No, if you have, if you're scrolling and you're trying to get, with the season coming up, if you're trying to get in the mood and, take in as much content as possible to get pumped up for the season, I would say, sure, throw this on.
Yeah, it's a crisp 66 minutes too. You're not sitting there for 2 hours, or 4 if you're watching Tiger.
Yeah, no, it's a fast watch for sure. Very easy watch.
It was a very easy watch. Alan, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can you follow on social media? Keep up some of the stuff you're up to.
Of course. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the platform. I am on Instagram at Alan Austin Sports, Twitter at Alan_Austin_. And new episode, we just had a new episode drop of the Alan Austin Show. So that's making a comeback. I'm also doing the American Scene podcast where my co-host Ben and I discuss movies with American in the title. And I have been doing random baseball player shout-outs on social media. So if you like random players from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, make sure to follow me to see who's going to be next.
When is the random Desi Relaford shout-out coming?
What a drop. You know what? I'll make that Mondays. Monday will be the Desi Relaford random player shout-out by request of Mike.
Yeah, as I remember, he made a pit stop on the Mets at the end of his career, so Desi Relaford is a name drop.
All right, Monday, February 22nd will be Desi Relaford.
So when this podcast is in your ears, you'll hear about Desi Relaford from Alan Austin.
Beautiful.
All right, thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Mike.